Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I have a special guest from a different state. I'm going to have her introduce herself to you all.
Yes, different the state is. I'm here in Florida. I'm LaTonya. I'm LaTonya Summers. I was about to say LaTonya, North Carolina, but I'm LaTonya Summers. I hail from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've been here in Jacksonville, Florida, for 5 years, teaching at Jacksonville University, where I teach clinical mental health counseling. So yes, by trade, I too, Celeste, am a therapist.
Nice to be here. I'm glad Carolina, because they say Florida's like another country.
Ooh,
People they
ooh.
talk about. I know you're not from there, so I won't get onto you too bad. But you happen to be residing there right now.
And the things that I can say, but I want to hold space for Floridians, right? Who born and raised here, and this is their love. I get it. I understand. It's a different place. It's a different country. Yes, but I think I'm here for a specific time and for
Yes.
a specific purpose. So I'm glad to be here. There's a place for my work here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we do on the podcast is I talk to people that are empowering people by sharing their story. And every time I think about your story, I have like chills. It's exciting to have you on because so many people don't
Mm.
even realize they're struggling with what you've struggled with over the years, right? So I want you to start off by telling my audience a little bit about your upbringing and where you was raised.
Yes. Okay. So Charlotte, North Carolina, and not only Charlotte with all its magnificence, love Charlotte, North Carolina. I grew up on the west side of Charlotte. So this dialect that you hear me speaking with is not my natural dialect, Celeste, and audience. And many of you will relate to this. I'm from the west side of Charlotte. And I think when you think of west side anything, you automatically know what I'm talking about as far as
Chicago, the West Side, like the
inner
ghetto.
city.
Yes.
Yes, honey, inner city hood. Grew up in the projects. So my natural dialect is what we call African American Vernacular English, or AAVE, but we know it as Ebonics, right?
Oh,
Okay. It's got
you
a full word
I
to
didn't
it.
know that. You just
You
taught me
did.
that.
Yes, yes,
No.
yes. Ebonics is
Yeah.
what it's known in our community. But, my natural dialect, this right here is trained and polished. But no, I'm like, honey, I looked it good in this, turquoise dress. And Celeste be asking me these questions,
Yeah.
screet and faux for the stove.
I
And,
used I was in college writing like I spoke because it was hard for me to get it together.
right,
Yeah.
right. And that language had come to embarrass me, but now, oh my gosh, when I hear it, I love it. And I'm like, I'm so far removed, permitted myself to be so far removed, from that language and from my roots, that I'm just glad to be here. But yes, grew up in the west side of Charlotte, on the west side of Charlotte, and everything was black schools, black churches, black communities, black neighbors. Everything was black. And growing up, my grandmother, I grew up in her house, and the language in her house was colored. So you'd be watching the news, and just by what happened, she'd say, "Oh, he was white, wasn't he?" Or, or he was black. Like, you could tell everything was about color. We'd ride along on Sundays, get to the south side of Charlotte where these big houses are. And she'd say, "Well, this is where the rich white people live." So I took that at, 4,
Oh.
7 years old. And I'm like, that means black people can't be rich, or black people can't live here. And I learned early, or told myself early, I was going to live where the white people live. So
Mm.
after I graduated school, I went to one of the whitest universities that there are in North Carolina, Appalachian.
Intentionally?
Oh, honey, yes,
Oh,
yes.
wow.
Because I said I was going where the white people, I just thought, and the way I was trained is that white people had all the answers. They had all the power. Like, if we wanted something, welfare, rent, I mean, it was white people in charge. And so I just decided I was going to be among them, and I was going to learn their ways. And I figured that if I was going to be something, I needed to be white, or as close to it as I possibly could be. So Appalachian State taught me well. Those professors, like, "Come here, honey, because the way you talk." And they groomed me, right? I learned to dress the way. So when I would go home, one of my childhood friends said, "When you start dressing like a white girl?" And I'm like, "How does a white girl dress?" And Celeste, she pointed at my outfit, and I looked down, and I got on Banana Republic, Liz Claiborne, J. Crew. And I'm like, Oh, wait, and some Birkenstocks. So I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what you're talking about, right?
Wait, when you
Everything
was going in the
changed.
mirror though, did you not? Did you feel
No.
like you didn't love yourself when you would look in the
Oh,
mirror? Was you a
okay. So you couldn't have told me that I didn't love myself because what I thought was this is self-love. I'm getting to a higher heights and I can't get there the way I am. So I love myself and I'm
dang,
doing better by myself, right? I'm doing what white people do. I thought that was self-love. I didn't know though,
dang,
the more white norms and values, traditions and culture I picked up, the more I dropped blackness. I didn't know. I did not know. It wasn't. And when you're going through the process, the ways in which I hated myself, right? Because if I'm saying I didn't love myself or I didn't love blackness, then there had to be hate. And it was. I didn't recognize it at that time, but to hear the language or when I would mess up, speak incorrectly or
mhm,
I'm always wondering, oh, I hope that didn't sound stupid. Like all of this
dang,
internal
yeah.
is just psychological harm that always anxious, needing to be perfect,
I was about to ask you that. Your anxiety
Oh,
must have been through the roof, cause
right.
yeah,
But as a Black person, I didn't have the language for that. It
right,
wasn't
right.
anxiety, right? I'm thinking I'm doing what I need to do to be in the presence of white people and to move up in the ranks.
Damn.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, Celeste, I'm thinking this is just me. I didn't know this was something that Black people or people of color would resonate. It wasn't until I got into a doctoral program, I'm like, oh, this stuff got words to it, like assimilation. I'm like, that's what you call this?
Wait, but before you got into the doctoral program, there must have been some kind of shift for you to pick up on this assimilation piece that you're saying, right?
Listen, I spent 20 to 30 years trying to be white. No, man,
Oh.
had no idea. And I'm climbing ranks in my profession as a counselor. Honey, I'm owning a business with 22 therapists. I mean, I'm making it. Um, and there were things along the way. Like I remember I hired a white therapist in my practice, right? And she was older,
Mhm,
retired from my practice, and a Black woman called in who was seeing her.
mhm,
And she said, is Miss Connie there? And I said, oh no, she retired, but you
mhm,
can see someone else in our practice. And she says, well, do y'all have any other white therapists? I'm like, oh no, everyone else was Black. Miss Connie was white, but you
mhm,
can see another therapist. And she then says, I don't want to come to a Black therapist. Y'all do this, this, and this. That's racial identity development. She was saying things like, y'all do business half ASS.
mhm, mhm,
Downing Black people. Now, I'm trying to be white, right? So I didn't hear the racial identity development. If I was fully Black, I would have addressed it differently. But I'm like, oh, yes, I understand. Well, let me refer you to someone where you could see someone who's white. As a full Black person, I would have recognized where she was along the continuum of racial identity development and recognized she needed to work with someone that was Black. She
uh,
hated herself and
yeah,
was projecting it,
mm,
onto me and other Black people.
mhm,
And that's what I was doing, right?
mhm,
Um, being on that lower identity level, I was doing the same thing, judging Black people when I see them. Like, you see us on the street and we're talking, we're
mhm,
animated. I'm like, dang, just making Black people look bad. Something happened, it's
mhm,
a judgment, and I don't recognize that it's self hate. But now I can hear the self hatred, right?
mhm, mhm,
Someone is speaking Ebonics, I'm correcting them. Oh no,
mhm,
that word is so and so.
mhm.
They needed help or to be corrected. I mean, I hear it clearly now. I see it so clearly, but I did not then.
So you're not talking about correcting papers, you're talking about correcting people as they're just
Oh,
talking.
as they're speaking, people say conversate. I'm like, oh no, no, no. The word is converse.
Oh, dang.
Right, right.
When when, um, when you just for the audience sake, because I can understand, especially being in the South, I think the South developed a
Oh,
lot
yes.
slower than
Right.
the North. But when I think about the importance of assimilating during the slavery times and back then, tell people about like why that was probably formed for you, even outside of what your grandmother said, and just how that kind of even I think about my hair, like I have locks, hoop earrings, and my
Yes.
mom gave me a perm at 8 years old. I have a 10-year-old. I can imagine like putting a
Yes.
perm in her hair. at that age. No, I'm not downing perms. I'm just thinking about all those chemicals in my hair and
Right.
how, when I wanted to get locks, it was like, you sure you want to do that? Because it's not
Yes.
straight. There's a lot of little subtle ways. I mean, yours
Oh,
was
yes.
pretty like in your
Yeah.
face, but there's a lot of subtle ways
Oh,
we
yeah.
don't realize that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
trying to
Be
assimilate
white.
to
Right.
whiteness. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. These are braids. I would have never, ever worn my hair like this while I was assimilating. My hair was black.
Yeah.
And even coming into academia when um, I came with a weave, right? Because it's Florida weather. And I'm
Mhm.
like, it's no sense of getting a perm because it's so
Right.
humid here and I'd have to keep. So I came with a weave. Um, Still in that process of becoming black though. But this is, honey, this is new. This, mhm. So you can hear this process is still very new. But yes, there were things that were passed down. And Dr. Joy DeGruy does an amazing job
Yeah, she
explaining this in her book, Post-Stress, Post-Slavery
yeah.
Traumatic Syndrome. I'm probably getting the title of that wrong, but just how we handed these things down and the relaxing of the hair and the way in which we were taught to dress, right? Kind of your hair, your appearance speaks way before you open your mouth, and you want white people to know or to not presume that you're incompetent
Mhm.
because of your hair
Mhm.
or the way in which you dress. And so those and so many more norms were passed down so that we would honor respectability politics. Everything
Mhm.
has a name now.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it was just, fix your hair. But there's nothing wrong with my hair in its natural state.
That's wild. Why would
Right.
it but why wouldn't people not like themselves if you're told to fix your hair? They just recently passed this law where you can't get discriminated because of your hair. And we're celebrating it, but I think about how sad it is and how hard it
Right.
must be for people that may have certain textures and have like tried to
Right.
assimilate and how heavy you must feel like so light with all of this new freedom you have on just by your way of
Listen.
thinking.
Ooh, 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 wait, and the way that words come out of my mouth so fluently, that wasn't the case because being
Yeah.
in navigating white spaces, there was a stuttering, and not a literal stutter, but I had to process so much before I would say, and then I'm having to speak with a smile all the time, so I wouldn't be the angry Black woman, so not to perpetuate stereotypes, but now I have less of a filter and less F's to give because this is who I am. And you either take it or leave it. I've earned this space. You didn't give me anything. But that thinking is all just new. It's all new. And yes, I feel so much lighter. And it is sad that my hair has to be legislated. Like I got to have a law
I
to
know.
be able to come to work or my children to go to school with their hair in the natural states. And that's just so upsetting, but
Mhm.
as a Black woman trying to be white, wearing a weave or wearing a relaxer, that didn't even touch me. I'm just like, "Ooh, like poor Black people, they better put a perm in their hair," you know? It's
Yeah.
just it's so different, and I just hope this book and talking more about racial identity development helps so many other people to be free.
So, thank you for sharing that. I have chills just thinking about just how much you were just surviving life. You were not living life. You were not being your authentic self. When we're not able to be our authentic self, we suffer, right? There's a lot of medical conditions people have because of their lack of being authentic. And I'm curious about, is there an identifiable moment where you really started to make some transitions, because you have a whole book which I'm going to talk about that process called Black Again.
Yes.
So what was that process like of realizing, like, what am I doing?
Right. I in the book I talk about this. Trayvon Martin's death
Yeah.
was the thing for me because at that time I had three children at that time. Two were boys and about the same age as Trayvon, one wearing a hoodie and tall. And we lived in a white community, so still trying to be white. I said when I was 4, I was going to live among the white people. And so I accomplished that, living in the suburbs, putting them in white schools, all the things that I thought these are indicators that I've made it. When Trayvon was killed in a white neighborhood, it dawned on me abruptly and immediately, baby, this white neighborhood does not protect you, right? It's more of a sword than it is a shield.
Mhm.
Um, and then I started having to have the talk with my kids. Now they're 14 and 16. Black families, we have the talk sooner than that. But because I didn't identify as Black, I had taught my kids, you're just as good as anybody else. You can do anything anybody else can do,
Yeah.
Whereas I should have been saying, you can do anything else anybody else can do. They won't recognize it. I need you to recognize it because you're Black. I just would have had to talk differently. Trayvon Martin's death was the thing that woke me up, but it wasn't enough because I still thought we're safe in this Black neighborhood. It was that, and it was the doctoral program where they saw me as Black, and there were obstacles against me moving through that program. And I had to say to myself, girl, everybody sees you as Black. You better see it.
Mm.
And so those were two encounters that I had that pushed me towards becoming Black again.
Wow. And, I always tell people my awakening to systemic racism was Trayvon Martin. Because when you think about it, in school, we start off learning about Black people being slaves,
Right.
and being that I'm no longer a slave, I'm thinking we're doing better than.
Yes.
And so, Trey, what happened with him, and then I'm like, oh, this guy's going to jail, right?
Oh yeah.
Seeing, and maybe that's when things were more of a court. Like, maybe I don't know if that was what era that was, where we seeing things more on social media, because it wasn't like the first time something like that happened, right? And so seeing how people responded to his killing, and how it wasn't an open and shut case, was wild to me.
Yes.
That was really the first time I started to realize, like, oh, this is something
Mhm.
different. So it's
Mhm.
interesting that that was kind of like the aha moment for you as well.
Yeah.
So now you're in this doctoral program, you're recognizing that I'm actually Black, right? Because there's no way for me to assimilate. And
Mhm.
how did the book come about? Because that's something that not only are you realizing it for yourself, but you're making it public for other people to know, which must have been a hard journey for you to put it out there
Yes.
like that.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Yes. Yes. So the book releases on the 21st. We got 2 more days. And I can't tell you, my stomach is in knots
oh
because
my
I do
God.
feel like I'm going against the Black code. What happens in this house stays. I feel like I'm
I know, me too. That's why every now and then I'd be like, I've been podcasting since 2018. Every now and then I wake up like, what did I do?
Yes. Yes. I feel like I'm telling all my Black business.
Yo, yo.
I don't know whether to brace for backlash or prepare to celebrate because people, I'm hoping, will come and say, "Oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about."
Mhm.
So I don't know how to prepare myself, and but I'm excited, right? Because I have not always had a voice. I lost my
Yeah,
voice early
yeah.
due to growing up not only on the west side of Charlotte and deciding that I wanted to be white, but my Blackness was also interrupted by childhood sexual abuse, homelessness, physical abuse, foster care. Growing up in foster care, my Blackness was interrupted by a whole lot of things. And I talk about that in the book, and I'm like, people, when they see me, knowing I promote Black mental wellness and I have these platforms and influences, I do feel some angst about, oh my gosh, people are going to know that I've not always had it together.
Mhm. Especially
Uh,
the white people, because back then, I know you wasn't saying none of that. I was on the west side and none of that stuff
oh,
to
no, no,
them.
no. I'm
Uh-uh.
like, teach me as much as you can to help
Yeah.
me run from where I come from,
Yeah.
pretty much. So yes, I'm super excited. The book came about. I was doing, Black Mental Health Symposium, this annual conference I do every year. It's next week, so Lord, it's gonna come and go. Where I bring these mental health professionals and Black scholars so they have a place to showcase their work, and they come to an audience who's hungry, because generally we go to conferences and we learn all these things and we have to raise our hands and say, well, how do I take this to the Black community? And I thought, what if there was a conference where you didn't have to ask that, but everything was about how to work with Black LGBT, how to work with Black people who are addicted to substances, because there's a whole systemic and medical racism against helping Black people recover. Society believes we should be addicted to drugs. We're all drug addicts, blah, blah, blah. So The Jessica Kingsley publisher sent me an email and asked me if I could write a book on racism. And I thought, racism and Blackness. And I was like, no, I don't think I can write that book. But I don't even know if you publish memoirs. I have a book in my heart I'd like to write about racial identity development and Blackness and internalized racism. Um, and they emailed me back and said, well, if you can send us a proposal, we review it. And so that's how the book came about. It was nothing I planned to do. Apparently the time was right, and it was just time for me to tell my story. And Black Lives Matter, I think, ushered this in. I've been doing diversity work forever as a Black woman trying to be white, which I want to
Wow.
apologize to everybody who came to any of my seminars.
Wow.
But I've been doing this work for all of this time, and people would say, okay, here come LaTonya with the race card, or, here's LaTonya talking about race. But when Black Lives Mattered happened in 2020, then people wanted to hear what I had to say, and they wanted to hear about Black work. And by then I was Black. So I was like, okay.
Yeah. You was ready.
I was ready. Yes. I'm not getting ready to, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Tell Black people how to be white so white people can hear them. I'm ready to tell white people how to hear Black people so that, so that things are different, so that you can be a real ally.
Wow. And when you talk about this racial identity and the conflict that happens inside, explain to people, because yours, I mean, yours is very in your face, overt. That's the word I'm looking for. For some people, it may not be as overt. What are some ways that, you've been doing this work for a long time, you've struggled with this. What are some ways that people may not realize that they're trying to assimilate?
Oh, yeah. Good job. Some of the ways in which I recognize it now in myself is
Mm-hmm.
that when I am in spaces, I'm always negotiating my identities. And what that means is I'll say, how Black can I be in this space? Um, how much of a Black woman can I be in this space? Um, or I'll ask myself questions like, "Ooh, girl, don't say that, because then you're the angry Black woman." But if I'm so in tune and so in my head about my Blackness, my gender, my other identities, and I'm negotiating or scaling them back so that I can fit in or so that you can hear me, um, that's a good indicator that racial identity is at play,
Mm.
or I'm assimilating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other things, my name's LaTonya, and people who have power and privilege will either shorten the name or ask, can they call me something else? Or they call me something and I just say, oh, that's close enough. That's also an indicator that I may be on the low end
Yeah.
of identity. But someone who's high on the continuum will say, oh no, it's LaTonya.
For real.
It's LaTonya. If you can say pneumonia, which don't look like, did you
I've
hear me
been
say
in spaces and seen it happen. I was like, "Oop." I've
right?
seen, yeah.
I used to let people call me LaToya, Latasha. One white
Damn.
male at one point asked me if he could call me LT. No, sir.
Damn.
But yes, those are indicators of racial identity being at play and that I may be assimilating,
Yeah.
right? If I'm so in my head about how I'm speaking, like,
Mhm.
like I said, I hope I said that right, or I hope
Yeah.
I didn't sound stupid. No, you're brilliant.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
doesn't matter if you're speaking AAVE or Ebonics, or if
Mhm.
you're speaking their standard English. Say what you got to say.
Mhm.
Whew. Oh yeah, struggling with hair. Ooh, is my
Yeah,
hair professional
I
enough?
know.
All of those kinds of things where we're just negotiating these parts of ourselves, and it's like you're supposed to be exhausted when you leave from navigating these white spaces, because it's an
Right.
exhausting work. But when you're authentically Black, I have come to love Black men and women who take up space
I love
and
it.
then as they are.
Yeah.
And I was always the person who, oh, I don't want you to hear me before you see me. Right. My
Mm.
mother is one of those persons, just loud, honey. If it ain't her jewelry, you can hear her voice. And I'm like, whoo, Lord have mercy. But I love people who can take up space, and I've come to appreciate the fact that she's
Nice.
genuine.
Yeah.
Coming.
Yeah. Wow. I remember somebody I was working with was like, "Oh, I have an interview tomorrow. Oh, I gotta go straighten my hair."
Oh
And
yes.
I kind of challenged and asked questions about it. Then I've had people who said, "I'm about to start letting my natural hair come out, and it's scary." And it's like, my stomach's turning. For people that are listening, one, you can buy the book Black Again, right, to help
Yes.
with that process. What
Yes.
would you say to them to work on processing? Because it wasn't like Friday you realized you assimilate and then Saturday you unassimilate. So
Mm,
I wish it was that easy. But what would you say to people as they're realizing like they've been struggling with their racial identity, and they're realizing it's taking a toll on them and they're feeling heavy? Because think
gosh.
about all that masking that happens at
Yeah.
work and in spaces. Now you come home unmasked. You don't have peace. Yeah, going
Mhm.
off on people at the house. You don't really have a life because masking it. It's harder to be who you're not than it is to be who you are.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
So
true.
when you're listening, for my audience that's listening, what would you say to them as they're trying to like untangle this racial identity piece that they may be going through?
Yes, I think it's just like, addictions, and what I would tell my clients,
Mm-hmm.
it took 14 years to recognize, addiction or to want
Yep.
to recover from it. It may take that or even longer to recover from it, right? It
Yeah.
don't take 2 to 3 days or a 14-day treatment to recover
Right.
from 14
Right.
years of something. I've assimilated for 30 something years, and I'm just 5 years Black again, right? So
Yeah.
way to go. And I can still see so, you know, I can just still see so much more room, that I've got to grow. But I'm like, be patient with yourself, give grace,
Mm-hmm.
recognize it and talk about it. Definitely buy Black again so that you can identify other areas where this
Mm-hmm.
may be manifesting,
Mm-hmm.
in your life. And counseling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although we believe, that that's a white phenomenon, we're getting better
We
at
are.
counseling as people of color. But I'm like, you better get help, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yes, get some objective help. It really does help. And with a person who does culturally responsive work. My
Yeah.
first therapist was a white woman who wanted to do inner child work with me, and I'm like, ooh, I'm just not going to be able to do it. But someone whose interventions match where you are and who you
Yeah.
are. I think that's so important.
I love that, the having grace with yourself, and it's not gonna, and as Dr. Summers is talking about, it's not gonna be overnight. Even as you listen to her talk, as powerful as she's speaking, and as much as she's in her blackness, I can tell like the pain of that time period was there. Like I can see how you've like, ooh, man, you like, so you're still working on it. It's a daily thing, right?
Oh yeah. And moving through it, like you don't have time to stop and think about how harmful this is because you don't know, right? I didn't
Right.
know.
You
But
didn't
now
know.
just to hear myself out loud saying what I've done is painful.
Mm,
And not only what I did to myself, Celeste, but what I did to my children.
yeah.
Like I didn't know that I was making them assimilate.
Yeah.
There's so much research and studies when we put our children in white spaces, right? Putting them in the white schools in the white community, they endure racism more than children who are in inner cities or in the hood or
Mm-hmm.
in Black communities or communities with people who look like them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. It makes so much sense now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I was exposing them to racism. And what that means is in white schools, when they're the only ones or
Mhm.
few, the teachers don't call on them. They are ignored or
Yeah.
they're presumed incompetent or they're presumed that they are good in sports only. Like all of these assumptions that white people haven't worked through, they perpetuate onto our children.
Yeah. And I've we have the system called the charter schools. I mean, the MECO, where you can get a lottery, get bussed out to a area where there's more money and there's which the schooling system's better, but you may be the only Black person in class. And I remember growing up, I'm like, my kids are going to MECO. They going
Oh,
to MECO.
yeah.
Yo,
Oh, yeah.
I got out of college, started doing family therapy, and I was working with people, and like one kid was in MECO, one what I started to see like MECO don't sound like it's the best place for my kid to be. I took myself off that
Yeah.
list. Dr.
Yeah.
Summers is right.
Yeah.
Not being around your people can be traumatizing.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So late, I'm having to teach my kids oh, y'all don't know y'all Black, you know? They're Black because of the messages that I gave them, and I talk about that in the book too. When I became Black, you know, I had them in white schools, and I changed them to the community school, which were Black schools. And I'm so excited because I'm in my Blackness. And I remember them coming home the first day, and Celeste, I'm checking them for fight marks. But when they went to the white schools, I didn't check them for anything. That's when I should have been checking.
The
I should have been
emotional
asking
marks. Yeah.
questions.
You would have
In the
never
white schools,
known.
no, in the white schools, I'm like, how was your day? I
Dang.
should have been asking, did your teacher call on you? What's your teacher's perceptions of you? You know, what did your teacher say to you? What did your teacher think about you being the only Black person? Right?
You know, and part of it, because you know, that was the space I had. I don't know if it was as overt as yours, but I know I'm going to be in this, you know, these different spaces. But
Mhm.
when you think about it, because you said something about they think, especially Black boys, they'll look at a rapper, a football player, basketball player, right? A huge part, and I'm sure you talk about this in the book, but a huge part is being able to see people that look like you in spaces, right? Because what you've seen on the news, and it's not by accident that the way they portray us on TV as criminals or as less than, right? It's not by accident. That's programming that you was watching every day, and you're a very smart woman, so I'm sure you sucked up that information and you made these little calculations in your little head without even realizing what you was doing. But tell people how important it is. Even if you, let's say you're in a lower socioeconomic status and you may not have the means to get out of your community, how
Yes.
important it is to be mindful of showing them, you know, everybody can't be Obama, right? But showing them like other
Yes.
Black people that are doing things even outside of music and sports.
Yes. One thing that I say is the hood takes care of itself. Having grown up in the hood, I'm like, that was one of the safest places that I could have been. But the programming, right, and the things that happened in the hood makes you think that the hood is not safe. And it was community, right? We had neighborhoods then. And I write this in the book. When we had neighborhoods, we were neighbors. In white spaces, we went to subdivisions and we were divided. It's different. So now you just throw your
And
hands up and you just kind of know your neighbors, you know, the people who live around you. Um, so one thing that I teach is my status as a Black person, or as a Black woman, or as an LGBT person, whatever my intersections are, these are all assets to me. They are not
mm,
liabilities, but
mm,
people have me to believe that these are liabilities. They are not, and the hood is not. The hood is rich, and in fact, white people and developers know the hood is rich, right? They'll tell us that it's no value, but let them want to gentrify it, then it becomes valuable. They
yeah.
see value in it, and I'm like, just I don't know. Don't believe the hype. The hood is valuable, and we can take care of our own.
Yeah, yeah. And learning about just all of like the places they bombed when we were coming together, just learning about that just kind of solidifies my mindset around how much things were put in place to separate us and to like not like love our identity, right? And to try to assimilate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, because we were taught white is right, you know, and Black is animalistic, not human, just all of these things. And internalized racism mean we believe them ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I heard someone say, when a brother is around, a sister should feel her safest. And that
Mm-hmm.
has not always been the case. But when I see brothers, I'm smiling, you know, I'm making eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, if no one else in this place has my space, you better.
Mm-hmm.
You better.
Whew, this was like a really powerful conversation. I had chills listening to you talk because as you're talking, I could just see the pain and thinking about how far you like not just pain, but the gratitude and just where you are now. I know sometimes you like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for the awareness
Yes.
because you were suffering for so long. So Dr. Summers has eighth annual Black Supposed like this is
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
I know you're excited about it, but just tell me about the first year. Like, how did you decide to come up with this? This is amazing.
Yes, our flagship conferences, if you're, I don't know your discipline, Celeste, if you're a social worker, if you're a counselor or a psychologist, so which one?
Counselor LMHC, so licensed mental health
Woo!
clinician.
Yes, I'm biased. I'm an LMHC too, as well as LCMHC in North Carolina. You know how our
Yeah,
uh,
different.
designations change, based on states. And so our flagship conference is American Counseling Association, ACA. And we would go to these conferences, and you pay so much money to go to the conferences. And I noticed that people of color didn't really come in those days, or they'd be sitting outside. I'm like, what y'all doing out here?
Trying to get our CEUs and just sign up
Right.
and we were
But
there.
there wasn't much content for us.
It wasn't. No.
um it was a spattering, just almost as an afterthought. And I really set out to change that. I wanted something where people would know what to do when Black people sit on their couches. And honestly, being selfish, like, if my children ever needed counseling, I need y'all to know what to do with them.
No.
And so I started soliciting Black scholars who were doing this work to teach us what to do when our people sit on the couch. And I'm so glad that there are so many more practitioners of color than there ever has been, because now people are coming to counseling. I just opened up a men's wellness center in 32209, which is a zip code here that is the hood. And I'm so very proud of it, but it's for men only who are uninsured.
Congratulations. Oh my gosh, you are amazing.
Thank you. Bless you. It opened last week. It opened last week, and people thought, well, why would you build something for men, and particularly Black men? They're not going to come. But when I say that center opened with 7 appointment requests,
Oh my gosh.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I cannot explain to you what it feels like to see Black men coming through the door. I just want to cry when I see them coming. But it's Jacksonville University. My students who have to do practicum and internship, I train students to work with men who live. In that socioeconomic status, and coming from the culture, the rich culture of the hood. And it's just beautiful so far.
I love your intention and your language. It's important, right? Because we've been taught a certain way and we don't realize we're soaking all that stuff up. So, I
Mhm.
really appreciate your voice and what you've allowed God to do for you, because it's not by accident you're here.
Mm.
Because just doing the work that I do and talking to people, I know it's needed. And people don't even realize they need it until they hear you talk, and they may
Oh,
not realize they have this racial identity. They don't realize why they're so anxious when they're in certain
yeah.
spaces, right? And so,
Yes,
like, hearing
yes.
your story and this book, Black Again, is going to let them know.
Mm.
Dr. Summers, let people know how they can find you and how they can find the book.
Yes. I'm on social media. Find me on Facebook,
Okay.
Instagram, and Twitter. Dr. LaTonya Summers 1. You can find me using those handles, but I'm out there on social media. And Black Again is wherever books are sold. You can find it on Amazon. It's in Target. It's in Walmart. And it released in 5 countries. So for your international
Oh my
audience,
gosh.
it's
Yeah,
open
I'm
and
in 100 countries, girl. I'm in 100
oh yes,
countries.
yes,
So,
yes,
I got some Black people be listening to me.
yes, right. Yeah, so that we can get free over there in Australia, in the UK, and in Canada. But there are 5 countries that the book
Oh
opens
my
in
gosh.
addition
Who
to the US.
knew?
Yes, yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
little Black girl from the West Side,
The West Side,
the
Charlotte,
rich hood
right?
of the West Side.
Yes, 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 yes. So thank you. But those are ways in which you can find me. Definitely on social media. You hit me up and let me know that I'm not the only one. Because I do feel like, girl, Black people don't nobody suffer with this but you.
Oh, you don't lie. This is hitting. Just reading about it is hitting. Just hearing you talk is hitting. So, if I didn't have this little spaghetti thing and I had to take my jacket off, I'm over here sweating listening to you talk.
Yeah,
It's good. It's good. Yeah, I appreciate you and your voice. It's your energy's felt. Like, I can feel your energy. So I
yes,
know when I read the book, I'm gonna feel it in the book too. So thank you so much, Dr. Summers.
yes,
I
yes, yes.
appreciate you. Oh,
Speaking of voice, I just also say that it's also available at Audible. And
for real? You did? Oh, that must have been a lot of work.
it was a lot of work, and yes, it was a lot of work. And my dad, whom I talk about in the book, died like 4 days before I went to record, and I was like, I'm going to record
Oh,
anyway. So my energy isn't there, but just to hear my voice and the pain, I think lends itself to the book and the topic. But available
wow.
on Audible too.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Summers. This is gonna be a hit, and I'm rooting for you, and
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you. So thank you so much.